All right, time now for our political panel, which is decidedly Victorian in flavour. Labor MP and member for Macnamara, Josh Burns, is here, along with Liberal MP, the member for Flinders, Zoe McKenzie. Welcome, Zoe. Josh, why don't we start out quickly? I know we've discussed on previous occasions the voice at great length, but just around the sense of occasion, I'll start with you, Josh. Yesterday, it clears the Parliament as a constitution alteration bill. What changes for you from here? This is in the context of a discussion that says politicians will now fade into the background. Does it for Josh Burns?
Well, my focus will be talking to as many people in Macnamara about this referendum and why it matters to me, but also encouraging other people to have conversations within our community. And we've already run a number of events inside Macnamara, and I have to say, Greg, having forums where First Nations Australians come together and tell their stories and are given a platform about their own family history and about what this referendum means for them and what it means for the future of our country, it's been such an uplifting and hopeful journey so far, and I'm really looking forward to the next couple of months and hopefully having a resounding yes vote, not only in Macnamara but around the country as well. Do
you accept the theory that says elected politics in this building has been a drag on the yes vote up to now?
Well, I think there has to obviously be a function of government in order to allow for the mechanics of the referendum to happen. That's happened. Parliament's done its job. We are on this journey now, and I think that it's much, much bigger than politics. This idea of a referendum didn't start with Anthony Albanese. This was a request made by 250 delegates at Uluru in 2017, and I'm really hopeful that Australians will be a part of this, and I'm looking forward to campaigning with people from all parts of our community to help get this really historic achievement.
All right, well, Josh is up for it on the yes side. Zoe, what happens as of yesterday in your own plans, if any, for the next few months?
I think the great news is now the decision sits in the hands of all Australians, which is fantastic. There will be more information coming forward. There will be pamphlets coming forward. The government has agreed to do that. And I come from an electorate where people still read. They'll read for themselves. They'll read the Constitution. They'll read what's proposed. They'll read the pamphlet and they'll make their own mind up. There are forums going on all sides, and I think that's really important as well. It tends to be a turn up and think it through community in Flinders, and that's, I think, how it should be.
But we won't see Zoe McKenzie out with a megaphone.
No, you won't.
Explaining reasons to vote no.
No, you won't. I've said what I said in the Parliament about it and gave my reasons for it. They were quite legalistic. I come from a constitutional law practice and theory background, and so people can make their own determination about my feeling, but it's not for me to tell them what to do.
All right, and just for the record, because we've asked others over the course of the year, the position you take, in that speech in the Parliament, is that the way you vote in the privacy of the ballot box?
Yes, it is. I mean, I'm still hopeful that the government may, as we get closer to the final date, look at what's proposed and work out if there is a way through that will guarantee greater consensus. But for now, I'm not really seeing that.
All right. Let's move on to matters of transparency and a bit of media reporting on Warren Entsch's wife, Josh. She obtained a federal grant. I think we're talking in 2019. Morrison government is in power for a pottery workshop. I'm not sure that declarations needed to be made as to who her husband was, or even perhaps by Warren Entsch himself as to his wife being a recipient. But does this say anything about the need for greater transparency and more regular declarations, at least on the parliamentary side of this?
Absolutely. And I think let's make 2 points. One is about the incident with Mr. Entsch, who I think everyone agrees he's a lovely guy, but I don't think this passes the pub test at all. To have someone, a wealthy donor to the Liberal Party, fly up to a remote Indigenous part of the country to get a vaccine ahead of the rest of the country, I think that most Australians will say that doesn't pass the pub test. On the issue of the transparency and the way in which elections are funded and political donations are funded, I mean, this is a big piece of work going on right now. We want to see more transparency. The member for Jagga Jagga, who is a great member of the Parliament, and she's working through this through the committees and is now making recommendations to government. We want to see more transparency. We want Australians to have more confidence that big money is not dictating politics, and that MPs are sovereign actors and are not being dictated to by anyone, and that I want Australians to have more confidence in this institution. So I think reforms like this are essential.
All right, well, Zoe, Josh isn't going to the details of the Warren Inch case. You may, if you wish, or just pick up on the latter point, if you like, the recommendations of the Joint Standing Committee on Electoral Matters, lowering the threshold to $1,000 and making it in real time. What is so objectionable about that? Because I know that the Liberals aren't supporting it.
I think at the moment it's a question of having noted what the committee recommends, and from there it will go into the hands of the government to deliberate, and I hope in conjunction with the coalition parties as well to talk it through. We're all in favour of transparency and also happy to do more real time, but in a way that's reasonable, right? So particularly in election time, everyone's very busy, and so to make sure you can actually comply without inadvertently making a mistake just because of the speed of events in an election campaign. But otherwise, my understanding is we have noted it and agreed to sit down and work with the government on it.
So it's not an always, no, never
Not based
situation.
on what I've read from the Minority Report today.
And
no.
some of these processes can, I imagine, be facilitated through technology systems in real time. I think that's happening in Queensland and perhaps other states.
One thing we need to remember though is that, and there's a separate recommendation from the Minority Report, which is to look at an offence of electoral violence and intimidation. That was much more prevalent in the last election than it had been in previous ones. I personally was the victim of it, having had my car completely spray painted from one end to the end with vile language. So it is happening and is happening more often. So we need to think about that. But equally, therefore, what that does to people who do donate to our campaigns brings them into the light, and people then maybe boycott them or attack them or spray paint their front windows as well. That's not fair. We need to think about the context in which we are running elections and what that means to those who wish to support us in our democratic efforts on all sides.
Do you recognise that danger? I must say I haven't sort of been into the finer details about risks that might attend real-time updates of donations, but is that something you recognise, Josh?
I think that there will be an administrative requirement when disclosing this, and the independent member Kate Chaney did go into some of these details in her comments about this. That what we want to do is strike the right balance, and therefore, you know, for a $15 donation made by a branch member, that might be all they can give. You know, I know that means a lot to me in my campaign if they're giving even just a small amount. But you know, is that going to have the sort of administrative requirements as a sort of $1,000 donation or more? So I think there are sensible conversations to be had about that. But the principle, Greg, of wanting to see more transparency in our elections and wanting to have or to enable the public to have more confidence in the way in which our elections are conducted is fundamentally a really important thing.
And it sounds like a debate that's going to be had in this current parliament, as far as we can tell, speaking to Don Farrell yesterday. Now, let's move on to housing. There's so many different threads to this Senate blockage that the Greens have set up, but I am keen to explore what the government's intentions are here, Josh. Is it a live question among Labor MPs as to whether the Housing Australia Future Fund in its current form continues to be put back before the Senate or the Parliament more broadly?
Absolutely. I mean, the housing bill, at least credit to the coalition that they've said they wouldn't support the bill, right? So if it went to a vote, the coalition have said they don't support the bill. The Greens are just playing this sort of procedural game, working alongside the Liberal Party, One Nation, Clive Palmer's bloke, to block that bill that will create thousands of social housing homes to even be debated in the Senate. So if the Greens want to vote against social housing, they should at least have the guts to vote against it, because what they're doing right now is essentially exactly the same thing. And you know, like if you know, when the coalition say no to things, they deal themselves out of conversations. And the Greens are doing the same thing. So we're going to keep working without them, regardless. They can sideline themselves. This housing crisis is too big, much bigger than the Greens' political strategy right now.
But the housing bill, the Housing Australia Future Fund is currently drawn up in the ledge, does definitely come back from after October sometime.
It should be voted on today. And it's only the Greens who are blocking this right now in conjunction with the coalition and all of the other right-wing parties in the Senate.
Well, is that a comfortable alliance to watch? Liberals and Greens, Liberals, Nationals, Greens?
Well, to be fair, it's because Labor and the Greens can't line up their ducks together. We have been clear about this particular policy in that it's misfounded. So it's a big borrowing, lots of interest, and no house to be seen for a long time. I'm personally still waiting for the buy a house with elbow policy that we heard about in the lead up to the election and have seen nothing from. Not to mention this new one that we got on the weekend, which is, whoops, we found out we've got some extra money and we're going to throw it at the states in the hope that they actually do something. This is poor policy writ large, policy in haste, and we're yet to see a single house from any of it.
And you're prepared to enter into shared endeavours with the Greens again? I mean, many people are looking at this standoff.
Very chummy, very chummy.
Standoff in the Senate.
chummy.
I'm wondering if this is, well, maybe to you, Josh, is this the end of the honeymoon on the legislative agenda?
There seems to be a honeymoon going on right now between the Greens and the Coalition, and they seem to be very in cahoots. Look, it's so silly, and I think Australians are finding the whole thing really frustrating. And if you look at groups like Homelessness Australia, the Aboriginal housing corporations, the housing, the housing community housing organisations, they're all saying we need to pass this thing.
Yeah,
and
there's been a fair bit of
we've had a decade of the federal government not building social housing.
Yeah.
We want to change that.
All right, big question, final question, Zoe and Josh. Keep cup, single use, disposable. I'm apparently persuaded to change my ways. Where
Indeed.
are you, Zoe?
I have a keep cup and I have my own coffee machine. That's how reusable and self-reliant we are in my office. So
not a very liberal way of doing things, but would you support some sort of ban on the sale of them?
If you need a coffee at 6:30 in the morning when you get in here, your own keep cup and your own coffee machine is the only way to do it, Greg. But I'm pretty much saying I think we're already there. I haven't gone to Aussies for, but only because it's too far to go. But Josh has got his beautiful bourgeois cup, as you called it.
Cheers, Greg.
Emblazoned.
Say no more.
It's not just because it's better for the environment. We don't want to have these cups thrown out. I can say this because my electorate is the home of coffee in Australia.
Right.
And if you want the best coffee in Australia, you should come to St Kilda or any other great part of my electorate. And the coffee tastes much better in a proper cup.
Yeah, that's the question we didn't get to ask Jerome LaSalle earlier. There's certainly a theory that it might. We'll test it. Well, there's 4 votes for permanent keep cups around here. Josh Burns, Zoe McKenzie, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Greg.